If you're a Blood Death Knight, it's easy to feel lost when you start tanking. So much to keep track of, and every mistake feels punishing. This guide breaks it down step by step so you actually understand what you're doing. Blood Death Knights are famous for moments where, while everyone else is dead, you're still in the middle of the pack, topping damage meters, healing yourself for insane amounts, and refusing to die. Sometimes it really does feel like you're the solo raid boss. That level of self-reliance only works if you know how to manage your resources. So here's what you need to understand first. This guide gives you the essentials to start tanking in Mythic Plus as a Blood Death Knight. You'll learn how to play the spec so you actually survive, even if you're a brand new player or coming back after a break. I'll show you what matters beyond the in-game rotation helper, so you know why you're pressing each button, not just following something blindly. To understand Blood Death Knight, you first need to understand your two core resources, runes and runic power, and how they fuel your entire kit. You start with 6 runes and they regenerate over time. Most of your abilities cost runes, and spending them generates runic power, which fuels your self-healing and sustain. So what are you actually spending these runes on? First, you spend 2 runes to cast Morrow Rend, which gives you bone shield stacks. This is your active mitigation. It increases your armor, haste, and even makes your death strike cheaper if you have 5 or more stacks. You would get to the desired 8 to 10 stacks first. Once that's handled, you don't want to press it again unless you're about to lose Bone Shield or go below 5 stacks. You spend your leftover runes on Heart Strike, which hits 2 targets by default and up to 5 when standing in Death and Decay with the Cleaving Strikes passive. Death and Decay should be maintained as close to 100% uptime as possible in all situations, single target and AoE. Now that you've spent your runes, you've built up runic power, and that's where Death Strike comes in. Death Strike heals you based on the damage recently taken and provides an absorb. But it's also important to maintain the buffs Coagulopathy and Icy Talents, which require regular Death Strike usage. A simple rule to start with is if you're at or near 75 runic power, press Death Strike, but it's also fine to press it earlier to keep your buffs or respond to incoming damage. Also, one critical survival tip from experienced tanks. The most common way Blood Death Knights die in dungeons isn't from missing cooldowns, it's from letting mobs sync their auto attacks after a group stun. When all of the enemies swing at the same time, it can instantly kill you. Take a step back to reposition slightly and throw another Death and Decay to desync enemy attacks due to the powerful slow it provides. It makes a massive difference even in low keys. So this was the core gameplay loop. Everything else, talents, cooldowns, hero talents, builds on top of this. Now this is the recommended build for Mythic Plus using the Sand Lane hero talents. I want to explain why these talents specifically. These choices come from top keys, Warcraft logs, and feedback from the Blood Death Knight Discord. This build avoids trap talents that feel safe but might actually hurt your healing, damage, or survivability long term. I want to go over some key choices made in this build and explain why we took those talents. First, we prioritize taking Bloodshot over Umbilicus Eternus. Umbilicus Eternus is not recommended for general usage. Taking UE means giving up Bloodshot, which passively gives you a 25% increased physical damage buff as long as Blood Shield is active. And Blood Shield is something you should almost always have up. That's because Blood Shield is applied before Death Strike deals damage, so every Death Strike you cast is already benefiting from that buff. UE looks good on healing meters, but this is misleading. Its Absorb Shield often delays or replaces casts of Death Strike, even undermining Coagulopathy uptime, and can absorb healing that would otherwise come from stronger sources like Death Strike or Blood Plague, making its value appear inflated on meters. By design, UE's Absorb is granted after Vampiric Blood ends, which is when your health is usually stable and Blood Shield is high, making it a shield you don't actually need and one that's often wasted. Another talent we're dropping is Rune Tap. Now, Rune Tap? More like Rune Trap. I don't know. You give up stronger talents like Hemostasis, Rapid Decomposition, or Perseverance, which cost you healing and damage. Hemostasis makes each enemy hit by Blood Boil increase the damage and healing done by your next Death Strike by 8%, stacking up to 5 times. And Heartbreaker makes Heart Strike generate 2 additional runic power per target hit. If you think you need Rune Tap to survive, it usually means you're not cycling through your defensives well or wasting runic power. Review your own usage of Icebound Fortitude, Lichborn, Vampiric Blood, Tombstone, Bone Storm, and AMZ. If you're holding some of those cooldowns or misaligning them, fix that before reaching for Rune Tap. And Soul Reaper is an execute ability that deals big damage when an enemy drops below 35% health. It's not a must for Sand Lane, but recommended if you can spare the keybind. If you hate the button, you can skip it, but you lose out on some free damage. The bottom line is, if you're dying, it's usually a gameplay problem and not the build you're running. Alright, so now that we went over our talents and build, I want to go over our hero talents, and I'll start with Sand Lane. Sand Lane is currently the most popular pick for Mythic Plus. It brings more overall damage, especially single target, and this season its AoE is more random due to the tier set changes. Death Strike gets a big damage boost, especially if you use Rune of Sanguination. A slight note, this is currently bugged and amplifies the effect more than intended, so take it with a grain of salt. Rune of Sanguination is a weapon enchant that boosts your Death Strike damage based on how low the enemy is. It's best for players who want to maximize throughput and are comfortable with a slightly higher mechanical complexity. It's slightly less forgiving if you make mistakes, but it's the meta for a reason. Survivability is still solid, but not higher than Deathbringer, which brings out to our second hero talent choice, Deathbringer. It offers a higher defensive power and a simpler rotation. It's slightly lower throughput, especially single target, but the defense is still very strong. It's great for players who want a more forgiving, less busy playstyle or are focused purely on survival. But for the sake of the meta demons that will come for me with pitchforks, we will stick with Sand Lane for this guide. Sand Lane has 2 core effects. Vampiric Strike sometimes replaces Heart Strike after you use Death Strike. Basically, Heart Strike gets sometimes replaced by Vampiric Strike, which is better. It deals shadow damage and grants a stacking haste buff, which increases your damage and healing. And the second core effect is Gift of the Sand Lane, our capstone hero talent. During Dancing Rune Weapon, Heart Strike always becomes Vampiric Strike, and the haste bonus is tripled, which creates your biggest damage and healing window. Alright, so now we'll go over the core abilities and rotation. The Blood Death Knight's gameplay revolves around 2 states, your normal rotation and the empowered window when you activate Dancing Rune Weapon. Each has its own priority system. First, I'll go over your core priorities outside of Dancing Rune Weapon, then we'll break down how things change when Dancing Rune Weapon is active. Playing Blood Death Knight well means understanding more than just which button to press next. You need to manage Bone Shield, spend resources efficiently, and leverage cooldowns for both offense and defense. Here is how it works in practice. You would first want to keep your Bone Shield up. Bone Shield gives you a bonus haste and nearly doubles your armor as long as it's active, no matter how many stacks you have. Once you go above 5 stacks, you also get a 5 runic power discount on Death Strike. That's why keeping at least 5 stacks up is a top priority. Every time you lose a Bone Shield stack, whether from enemy attacks, Tombstone, or Bone Storm, you deal damage and reduce the Dancing Rune weapon's cooldown by 5 seconds. There's a short internal cooldown when losing stacks due to auto attacks, but it's not something you need to track. Our second priority outside of Dancing Rune weapon is to use Morrowind efficiently. You would use Morrowind when Bone Shield drops below 5 stacks or is about to expire. Don't spam it, just maintain uptime and minimize wasted global cooldowns. Your next priority is to shift into Dancing Rune Weapon whenever it's ready. When Dancing Rune Weapon is off cooldown, use it immediately. This kicks off your burst phase and changes your rotation priorities. Your next priority is to manage runic power with Death Strike. Don't let your runic power overcap. Aim to use Death Strike whenever you reach more than 75 runic power, or sooner if you need the healing. Each Death Strike also gives you Blood Shield, further increasing increasing your survivability. Your next priority is Abomination Limb. You would only want to use it outside of Dancing Rune Weapon, never during. Dancing Rune Weapon copies your core spells, but not Abomination Limb, so timing it before Dancing Rune Weapon gives you maximum value and resource generation. Your next priority is to use Soul Reaper for Execute. You would use it on targets that drop below 35% health soon. As Sand Lane, you would only use this outside of Dancing Rune Weapon as it's a DPS gain, but not during your burst window. However, if you're using Deathbringer, this becomes part of your burst. Try to fit as many Soul Reapers as possible inside of Dancing Rune Weapon. Your next priority is Tombstone and Bone Storm. Now, Tombstone and Bone Storm are both abilities you would use when you have at least 6 Bone Shield charges. These abilities consume Bone Shield for burst damage, give you runic power, and speed up your Dancing Rune Weapon cooldown. Bone Storm also refunds you 10 Bone Shield charges, keeping your rotation smooth. Your next priority is Consumption. You would use Consumption as soon as it's available for AoE damage, extra healing, and most importantly, 2 bonus runes. It also makes your Blood Plague tick faster for more damage. Your next priority is Blood Boil, and you would use it frequently. It's your primary AoE damage, a major threat generator, and it builds hemostasis stacks, which buff your next Death Strike. It also applies and refreshes Blood Plague, but that's not its main value. Just try not to cap charges and feel free to press it again when new enemies enter the pool to secure aggro. And your last priority outside of Dancing Rune Weapon is Heart Strike. When everything else is handled, spend excess runes on Heart Strike. It generates runic power, and with Heartbreaker can keep your Death Strikes flowing in AoE. I get this was the priority outside of Dancing Rune Weapon. I know it might seem like a lot, but Dancing Rune Weapon comes up very often because of Insatiable Blade. So once you pop Dancing Rune Weapon, your priorities shift to maximize the value of temporary duplicate weapons, and the focus here is simple. You would maximize your throughput and don't waste any global cooldowns on anything but your core spenders. You would ignore Tombstone and Soul Reaper. During Dancing Rune Weapon, your best global cooldowns are always Vampiric Strike and Death Strike. Don't use Tombstone or Soul Reaper. They're not worth the lost damage and healing in this window. Then you would open up with Blood Boil. Use Blood Boil once at the start of Dancing Rune Weapon to apply Blood Plague if new enemies enter the pack. It's fine to press it again to lock in threat. Then you would place a Death and Decay early in the pool to enable Heart Strike or Vampiric Strike to cleave up multiple enemies, boosting both damage and runic power generation. It also provides strong passive bonuses from talents like Sanguine Ground, Unholy Ground, and Grip of the Dead, so aim for near 100% uptime in both AoE and single target fights. The next priority is to use Bone Storm if you have more than 5 Bone Shield charges. If you enter Dancing Rune Weapon with more than 5 Bone Shield charges, use Bone Storm to dump them for healing and AoE. Bone Storm will refund you 10 charges, so it will make your rotation smoother, meaning you don't need to press Morrowind as much. Your next priority is to use Consumption, and if Consumption comes off cooldown during Dancing Rune Weapon, hold it and use it at the last 4 seconds of Dancing Rune Weapon. This maximizes Infliction of Sorrow bonus damage and grants you 2 extra runes just before Dancing Rune Weapon ends. If it comes off cooldown before Dancing Rune Weapon, just use it, don't hold it. Your next priority is Death Strike and Vampiric Strike. During Dancing Rune Weapon, every Heart Strike automatically becomes a Vampiric Strike thanks to Sand Lane. Use Death Strike often to avoid runic power capping, maintaining your buffs, Icy Talents, and Coagulopathy, and stay alive. When you're out of runic power, you would fill with Vampiric Strike to continue dealing damage and triggering Infliction of Sorrow. This is where your biggest self-heals and damage comes from. Maximize these casts. Alright, so now that we've gone over the rotation, I want to go over our defensive toolkit and survival. First, we'll start with Vampiric Blood. You would use Vampiric Blood proactively when you expect heavy damage or your health is dipping fast. Don't save it for a perfect moment. If you think you need it, press it. In large pools, it's better to use it at like 80% HP to stay stable than panic at like 10% HP. Avoid overlapping it with other major cooldowns like Bone Storm or Dancing Rune Weapon unless it's a dire situation. Your next defensive is Icebound Fortitude, your best tools against stuns and big hits. Hold it for predictable dangerous mechanics or stuns that can be otherwise avoided. Do not overlap it with Vampiric Blood or Anti-Magic Shell unless you're about to die, and of course Anti-Magic Shell is our next defensive. You would use it as soon as magic damage is coming in. Again, don't wait for perfect moments. If magic damage is happening, press it. You can use it to immune dangerous magic debuffs, but don't be greedy. A used cooldown is better than a dead tank. And coming off Anti-Magic Shell, we got Anti-Magic Zone. This is a group utility cooldown that reduces spell damage taken by 20% for all party or raid members standing in it. It lasts 8 seconds or until it absorbs a set amount of damage. Too many players forget to use this. Even if your group doesn't need it, you can use it for yourself during big magic tank busters or boss abilities. Just make sure to place it where you and others can stand in it. A bad placement wastes a cooldown. And we've talked about this one for quite a while, Dancing Rune Weapon. It's technically both offensive cooldown and defensive cooldown. You would use it as soon as it's available for maximum uptime and your parry bonus. Don't delay it for more than like 10 to 15 seconds unless you're holding for a specific pull. More uptime means more safety and more damage. And our next defensive, Leechborn, you would use it proactively if you expect sustained damage, especially with the leech bonus it gives you. Don't overlap it with other defensives. This is like your bridge between bigger cooldowns. You could also use it to get out of fear, though not a lot of fear this season, especially if you're a tank. And our last defensive, we talked about it a bit, Tombstone. You would only use it with at least 5 Bone Shield charges, but I recommend 6 because I don't want to keep you without Bone Shield charges at all. And you need to be standing inside of Death and Decay. It grants a big shield, a chunk of runic power, and reduces Dancing Rune Weapon cooldown. So please don't sit on it. Never delay it for more than like 10 seconds for perfect setup. This covers everything you need to start tanking in Mythic Plus as a Blood Death Knight. A big thank you to Mandel and Tanky Baby from the Blood Death Knight class Discord for helping me put this guide together. Mandel is also the Wowhead guide author and theory crafter, so make sure to check the Wowhead guide for more in-depth details. You'll find the build link in the description. If you find this guide useful, consider liking the video and subscribing for more video guides just like this one. Leave a comment if you have any questions or you want to see another spec covered next. As always, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.